Hello.
Hello.
Who are you?
My name's Allain. I'm a British singer-songwriter, and my dear friend Jarmila has invited me to interview her to make a kind of audio start to her biography for LiftMusic. We go back about 20 years. I think I met you in the middle of the 90s in a small pub called the Trolley Stop in Dalston in Hackney.
That's right.
Well, we can go
possibly.
Yeah,
or somewhere there, one of those
somewhere
local parties.
There. Well, while we're talking, we can go back in time and even further back, right back to your childhood in Poland. But I want to start in the present, and I want to say to you, what's cooking? What's cooking in your musical kitchen lately? Like this week, what is going on for you musically? What are you doing right now?
I want to say hello, John, and I'm fond of you. And we've been friends for many years. You can't just sort of throw me into edit. Thank you for coming here.
It's a pleasure.
And for being such a wonderful, supportive friend for all these years. What's cooking and kicking in my musical kitchen in my musical studio these days?
Yeah, right now, this week.
I have been quite busy bouncing stems for my forthcoming album.
Bouncing stems yourself in your studio at your home here in Clapton, North London.
Yes, that's right.
Explain what bouncing stems means.
Oh, you have to consolidate every single track on your album and sort of mix it down to an audio file so that the engineer who will be actually doing a mixing will be, dealing with just consolidated audio files as opposed to a whole Logic project, because he will be working on Pro Tools and I have it all in Logic.
How did you get to become an engineer?
Am I an engineer?
Yeah, well, yes, you are. When did that start? When did you start to take control of engineering yourself?
I really don't want to call myself an engineer. I actually take my hat off. If I was to wear a hat, I would be taking it off for all the professional sound engineers in the world. And I can only call myself a sort of a beginning, crawling, amateurish, artist who had this dream to be self-contained and independent. So I would just be able to plug in my mic and record anything at any point of time, providing I don't disturb anyone in the environment, like my neighbors, for instance, as opposed to sort of, have to book the studios and always, count on a good mood and inspiration during the session in that studio. I just had this dream of going independent.
Is that part? I remember you enrolling on a course. Do you remember when I came round and you were studying?
Yes, writing assignments about decibels and hertz.
Yeah. When was that? I remember you being really...
Yes, it was only a one-year course in music production and sound engineering. And, I've fallen in love with that subject. So following that, and even prior to that, I have been watching various interviews with sound engineers and reading books by professional Grammy or nominated or so engineers. And it struck me that many of those people say that the real thing starts to happen several years down the line. These engineers get their Grammys 17, 20 years after first starting that profession or occupation. So, it's a long way to go, and this is why I won't be mixing my second album.
But you do a lot of it. You do all of the recording at home.
I do all the tracking. I also do provisional mixes. And I also, I do my own mixes for whatever productions. But my own baby, my second solo album, it's just so much to handle. The album, on average, each piece has got 130 tracks, and to juggle all these frequencies. And anybody who knows anything about sound engineering, it's like you're dealing with a real phenomenon, sound. It's like, going to a sound engineering course should really take about 6 years, like studying human body from a medical point of view to become a doctor, because to properly handle frequencies with the respect that they deserve, takes quite a lot of experience and knowledge. And here I am, this naive dream of mine. Let's create a project studio at home, learn sound engineering, and then just go for it. Problem is that my head seems to be invaded by very saturated musical ideas, and to do it justice, I usually have to overlayer a lot of tracks, and then I'm in trouble, obviously, because then to then juggle these 150 or 30 tracks and to make each one of them be nicely sculpted out of the overall sound with the use of a whole lot of plugins. You have to do it with much expertise. And
well, you might think that you don't give the same time and attention to the mixes that you present to your record company, but that's because you have an exceptionally high standard that you set yourself in your work, and you're meticulous. I know that about you. I've known that a long time about you. So what you might
I take it as a compliment?
Yes, please. No.
Thank you.
I just know that you are phenomenally concentrated and apply the most incredible patience and concentration and high levels of perfection to your work. So I'm sure that what you give your record company is more than adequate. But the perfection in your own engineering and the sort of perfection in the first album, which, to be honest, I've never heard a more ambitious debut album from a solo artist in my whole life as when I heard... You pronounce it. I can never say the word.
Hashgacha.
Oh, my goodness. Let me try saying that. Hashgacha.
Hashgacha. Very good.
What does that word mean?
This is a Hebrew word for, maybe we can put it as something like sort of divine synchronicity, those magic moments that happen in everybody's lives when they're convinced that it has come from above, so to say, for it to happen, to manifest in your life. So it's like a sort of a divine coincidence or synchronicity, serendipity.
There's no track on the album called that.
That's right, but the album was written, unlike the forthcoming album called Aspaklaria, and that is actually, there's a track that's eponymous of the album. It's a track called Aspaklaria at the same time as the album is. Well, what happened with Hashgacha is that I was on a particular spiritual journey at the time, late 90s, until this album was actually fully finished and released in 2003. For those few years, from 96 onwards till the release of the album, I was deeply involved in certain spiritual practices, and I traveled around the Middle East as well. And during my first travel to Israel, Jordan, and Egypt in 97, I just felt on the wings of an eagle, sort of led by amazing coincidences and people appearing on my path just as I wanted them to, with certain information that I needed at a time. And it sort of felt like there's some other entity guiding me there.
Do you mean people who had information to help you with your album, or just helping you with life?
Traveling, experiences of a traveler, or questions that I was seeking at the time. For instance, some philosophical, spiritual questions. Let's say a question being pondered in the afternoon, suddenly in the evening, you go to this traveler's hostel and suddenly you meet a person that, without being asked, answers that very question for you. And it was like on a daily basis for a whole month of me traveling there. It was happening several times each day. It was a very magical time from that point of view. And so I came back to England with plenty of questions answered, so I thought, and certain decisions have followed. And this is what I really wanted to talk about through this music on my first album, Hashgacha. Different stages of that spiritual journey are described in each piece. And it's kind of difficult to talk about these ethereal concepts.
Your debut album is the most generous, enormous project. I think, how long is it in total? It's over an hour long.
Oh, it's actually just under an hour. It's about 52 minutes or so. But it has, how many pieces? 12, I think? 12 or 13?
12 or 13. It feels like a gargantuan collection of music with a fantastic palette of sounds. I love the way it opens with just your voice, with a sort of 2.5 minute piece of vocals only. And that kind of introduces us to your voice, which is phenomenal in your range and is really pure. It unfolds through the album like a sort of one-woman army of textures and feelings and all emotions without any words. I've never heard such a rich, wordless, emotionally powerful vocal performance. I'm not a jazz listener. I'm a singer-songwriter, so I grew up in the 60s with a diet of very melodic-based, lyrical-based songs with structures, crafted songs. I grew up with the Beatles and with the Kinks, people like Joan Armatrading, Joni Mitchell. So when I heard your debut album, it was really challenging to my ears, but it really affected me emotionally very deeply because of its breadth of kind of audio spaces, from the very intimate moments of just one voice or just your piano playing to these huge wide landscapes of sound with all the multi-layered vocals and the brass instruments, the trumpet, the horn, the other jazz
French horn.
The French horn, sorry, yeah. Flugel, double bass.
Yes, that's right.
And just enormous sounds with
There was a flugelhorn there, that's right.
Yeah, wasn't
trumpet and French horn, yes, and double bass.
Yeah.
Gosh, it was so long ago, I hardly lost touch with it.
Well, it was mind-blowing. The whole very long year upon year of you making it privately and me wondering what you were doing and what was there going to be at the end of all of the time you'd devoted to it was shatteringly exhilarating when I heard it. I remember lying on my back on the carpet at a friend's house with 2 speakers off the wall on the carpet next to my ears and just being transported somewhere else for what felt like forever. It was such a huge piece of work. And I'm very curious what's happened between Hashgasha and now and how the new album is different. I've heard a bit of it. I know it's you singing words.
Very big change.
Yeah, and I know some of it is very groove-based. And it's no less exciting, I'm sure. But something has happened to you between then and now, and another long project. This album, when did you start the new album?
Well, really, this album's been developing gradually as I was learning the sound engineering and operating my recording software. So, I had to go over all these hurdles, technical hurdles. And as this was happening, each song was, being created. It's not that I've, suddenly spent 5 years on learning engineering. And then once I knew it all, I decided, okay, now I'm ready to start my work on the second album. It sort of happened as I was learning. And this is probably why it's sort of schlepping, if I may use the Yiddish word. It's sort of dragging for all these years.
But there were very important work collaborations along the way. I remember you attending the Mac store in Regent Street and having a fantastic collaboration with somebody there that...
we did some tracks with at the time, a dubstep producer, Larry Holcomb.
Tell
was
me
also
about
my
Larry.
tutor.
Tell me about
This
Larry.
is not really reflected in any way on this album, actually.
But maybe it fed into the direction of this album.
The romance with the electronic beats.
Yes.
I see. This is where we're heading. I don't really know how these things happen. And to be honest, Jan, let me just sidetrack a little bit, a little detour. I find it difficult to altogether speak about what motivates an artist to create a particular piece of work, piece of art, music, or other. Because I think that it's a little bit out of our control deep down. And now to sort of try and pinpoint what influences me at any particular period of my creative time. It's. I remember giving an interview to the BBC World Service several years ago. And when I listened to it subsequently, a few years after it's been recorded and played on the radio, I was shocked to hear who is this person? What is she talking about? I couldn't identify myself with that. And then I realized that perhaps we are just, every time we record anything really, be it that interview, for example, today, we are really just capturing our souls at this particular point of space and time. And this moment will be gone. It already is gone as I speak these words. And I think that when I started thinking about all these things and starting to attempting to understand what really is happening inside us, I've realized that when it comes to me personally, I have one underlying drive. It is to. It's totally unconscious, or perhaps I thought it was. Now it's starting to come to surface and being more. I'm becoming more aware of it. But actually, I didn't know that. This is what's happening all these years as I transform and go through all these musical metamorphoses. One couldn't be more different from another. The driving force behind it, I've realized lately, is that I'm trying to subconsciously surpass myself, to sort of break. I have a certain limitation in the brain that bothers me, obviously, on a subconscious level. And I think that subconsciously I must be trying to break it, to break beyond the limitations of the brain, to see what's on the other side of that rubble, of the wall that's just been broken at last, and create some sort of a breakthrough. And I'm always very curious to know, how will I function on the other side of the wall after the breakthrough? It feels usually very liberating before it becomes a cage again, and then I have another wall to destroy and break through to another paradigm. Because you've gone as far as Hashgacha album, but before that there was a romance with all sorts of things, really, right back to my upbringing.
Well, I wanted to ask you about between the albums, the time between the albums. Not to pin you down and tell you meeting this person was really significant and we did this together, so much as just, you're right, the sort of organic experience of bouncing things off others, getting inspired by others, getting supported by others, having their kind of input with you on the things you make. But as your friend, I do remember quite an intense period of you working with the drums and bass beats. And for me, it was completely exciting. It was a bit like you were being given loops by somebody and doing whatever you wanted with them, like just playing with stuff, accepting what you were being given. And it was a different way of working, because you had been with Hashgacha very much what seemed to be alone with your own compositions and inviting players in to add extra instruments to the palette of sounds, different players coming in on it. But going in a more contemporary, don't like to use the word commercial, but dance rhythms and beats coming in. Just being here with you in your flat, and you would play me something Larry had given you, like a sort of loop of sound, and that relationship. Oh
yes, we did one track based on his drum loop. I remember that will actually appear on the album. It's called Only You. And I do remember Larry said, okay, let's do a collaboration for one of my dubstep tracks, yes. And we met in his place and said, okay, I got that loop for you. Let's see what's going to come out. So
yeah, what did that feel like when you got...
a string section. And you know what happened is that it really never worked as a dubstep track. I just hijacked it to my little paradigm. And that's how it's ending up on my album, because it became then one of the tracks for the album. But I think as you were talking about it all and that period of going to lessons and learning, Logic and meeting with all these groovy people who taught me Logic in one of the Apple stores, with a few of them I'm still great friends and we continue collaborating on various tracks. But I think what happened is that technology basically, put it down to technology. Technology made it possible for artists of all sorts to suddenly just have access to all these amazing pre-produced drum loops and downlifters, uplifters, transitions, you name it, Atmos and all these sounds that are already pre-manufactured for you. All you do is just go through your sound library and loop library and pick the one that goes well for you. And then you obviously manipulate it, so it's sort of not the same for every person, right, that uses such libraries. But I think inevitably I just started sort of swimming in those waters and delighting while swimming there. Wow, so wait a minute, we don't even have to do any, proper drums. I mean, they're all there, ready to use. And that sort of probably influenced the shape of this current album, that it's mostly based on pre-produced, amazingly sounding drum loops.
Great.
Very exciting. Electronic bass.
That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
And so how does your voice relate to those drum loops on the new album? What's happened? What's been the evolution of your voice? What's different between your first album and the one coming? What are you doing that's different with your voice, do you think?
Don't know. Rescue me.
Well, you're singing words, are you?
Oh, yes. Oh, is that what you think is to do with the loops?
I don't know if you've got words with meaning in the new album, because Hashgasha was a wordless album.
Yes.
It was singing with vocal sounds.
Jan, it will always be my firstborn, sort of fully contained firstborn baby album, this Hashgacha album, because really this is, I think, the most honest expression of the soul, where words can be bypassed and in fact you can gain hopefully deeper understanding between the two people when the less words are used, really. It seems to me that the deeper communication can be achieved. When, for instance, all kinds of misunderstandings or lack of understanding altogether just goes out of the way, and you don't even have to, turns out, use any words to have a complete, fully blossomed,
emotional,
developed bond and understanding and communication without words.
Between who? You and the listener?
And generally people. I think in relationships, the more words have to be spoken, the bigger the danger is that there really isn't an understanding, that people are just trying to describe something with difficulty that they don't really understand, really, between each other. But have you not had such moments that you just in silence, and it turns out that you're in perfect synchronicity with this other person you share space and time with at that particular moment of time?
It's rare, but it's lovely when it happens. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, it wasn't a premeditated thing. It just felt like this is, to me personally, a very real, authentic expression of my soul, where I don't have to verbalize feelings and make any descriptions and judgments and conclusions through just a word that has got conceptual, heaviness to it.
Is this what Meredith Monk was doing? Is she a sister in that realm of emotional expression?
I will now show you how I could skillfully use the word hashgacha here in practical sort of situation. It was a hashgacha that when I was doing my trolley stop events, to which you came on a few occasions, my performances there, that my mother sent me a video, a VHS, with a recording of Meredith Monk's tour in Poland. And I couldn't believe this, that there is a person somewhere out there, forgive me for my ignorance, I was much younger then at the time, that there is this person that is trying to tap into a similar energy of expressing yourself without the use of words, which I find terribly limiting. And so now going back to your question about the current album, you know, this first album, Hashgacha, it caused me so much trouble in the world of music industry, where Sony Records wanted to release it, One Little Indian wanted to release it, Sanctuary Record wanted to release it, but there was always a but. All these people saying, oh, how amazing, but why don't you use words? Why don't you start singing with the use of words? Okay, obviously this was not at all the concept at the time, so I ended up releasing it on Jarmila Records and then found a licensing deal with 33 Records. But this new album, maybe, I don't know if it's a compromise or trying to answer all these representatives of these big record companies at the time in a dialogue with me. So after all these years, perhaps I'm still having a conversation with them. Who knows? Or maybe it's just that I've arrived to a point in time where I feel more at ease about making such a seeming compromise, where I actually have to, you know, contract myself in a way to words and their meanings in order to create a song. But I hope that this time it will be maybe for that very reason a bit more approachable, because as it turns out, people like to sing lines and they want to voice it. They want to sing words when they hum popular sounding songs, right? That's what I was told by many of my friends and supporters about Hashgacha in particular, that, you know, I wish I could there was a line or two that I could just sort of get attached to and sing with you. And now it's just ay, 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 and ho, 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 and pam, pam, pam. All these wordless syllables.
What I've heard of the new album, the preview snippets you've played to me, you seem to be using the words on the new album to very good autobiographical effect in a kind of abstract way. How personal are your lyrics on the new album?
Very, Jan.
I know. And so can you not trust that saying your words about your experience is going to be worth it? I don't think you've compromised. I don't think you've compromised in your use of words, because you're saying deeply personal things. Do you agree? You're not doing a David Bowie where you cut up sentences or words from a newspaper and throw them all over the floor and then pick them up and end up with things out of, you know, Mickey Mouse grows up to be a cow, all that kind of Dadaist collage with words. And you're not doing a pop tra-la-la with it. Ooh, baby, I love you. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You're using words to say your truth. Are you not?
Yes.
And how has that felt? How has it felt to sing words?
I'm trying to perhaps break one of those walls and free myself. But not being an English-born speaker makes it a little bit more tricky. And I do have you and a few other English-born friends who will always run these lyrics through yourself or a few other friends of mine and check that, you know, the grammar is correct. There's a bit of a chip on both shoulders here.
But you know...
Then I think of Björk.
Well, I was going to just say, non-native English artists have something special over English artists, in that their use of English is charming.
Awkward, maybe.
No.
I would like to think about my own.
I think one of Björk's strengths is her unique use of English, apart from her voice.
You're cheering me up.
Yeah.
Let's go in that direction then.
Should we take a pause?
Okay.